Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Dave, do you want me to just run this or?
Yes, Matt, if you'd like to. I have some questions for the group, but if
Yeah. I mean, it's informal, so I've got a bunch of questions too. And thanks for whomever was compiling those lists of names. I think we're in good shape now. I do think having this job description, which could use a few tweaks, may help us as well, because I'm kind of thinking some people may think it's a full-time job and it's not. So that will deter folks. It's a good client. That's basically, I think, what we are in essence. So anyway, with that, I don't know. I think one of the main things coming out of this is coming up with a schedule for first narrowing down our finalists. And I'd say we bring it down to like 4 or so, and then setting a Zoom time like we did when we brought Arish on board, and other new members, and interviewing those people, unless you all think it's better in person. And in person, of course, this pre-pandemic is how Carrie Donnelly and I brought on board Lonnie, and I don't remember exactly what year that was. So anyway, I'll open it up.
so I saw an email. So I've seen 2 emails. I saw the job description, which I perused just before this meeting, and then over the weekend I'd looked at the list of attorneys, and so I had talked with Lonnie previously, and so the 2 names, I see 2 of the names I know were the ones he recommended. One is a partner in his current firm, and then the second was someone he used to work with, who I think has done at least a lot of real estate law and may have a bit more of a corporate background. I'm assuming the other names came from within Dash. That was a law firm that seemed to have a lot of specifically transit clients. Josh, is that a name you had sent to us? Is that a name you had added to the list?
Yeah, well, first I want to give the credit to Beth. She's been working on this. So we thank
Great.
her for finding these people. So a couple of things were done. Yeah, Lonnie's recommendations were contacted. Beth went out there and scoured to try to find local firms that, we felt were worked in this field. And then so that's where they came from. And I have had a phone call conversation with all of these folks prior to this meeting, with the intention of being able to answer your questions about what I got out of those conversations. I'll summarize it by saying this. I think that Jane Stark, Kathleen Kraft, and Jana Marie Rust with Thompson Coburn are more focused on the federal space and helping with federal regulation, and that firm, we had a really great conversation, but the takeaway I got was they would be really great for us internally at Dash to reach out to if we needed to engage a firm for specific work related to our FTA stuff, but not for the purposes of this general counsel. The other 3 definitely all I thought were qualified, understood what we needed, what we do. I summarized it. That job description I threw together this morning within a few minutes, because Matt, you had reached out last week and asked for something to work from. I am not wed to that document. I'll happily share the Word document. You can hack it up however you want. But the conversations I had with these firms were simply to say, this is who I am. This is what the board does. This is the organization. This is generally what we've used Lonnie for in the past. These are the kinds of things. Do you check those boxes? Tell me a little bit about your firm. And so Beth compiled all the information, put the packet together. And what I told them was that it was up to this committee to decide, do you want to work from this list? Is there anyone else you want to add? Or who do you want to talk to from this list? And then for us to get those actual interviews scheduled for you. So that's just a package statement of sort of everything that's happened in the time since you all last talked about this to this meeting.
So did you
Josh,
go ahead,
oh,
Dave.
Matt, sorry,
Go
no,
ahead,
no, sorry.
Arish,
No,
go ahead.
you go.
I just want to know, did you speak to them?
You go, Matt, go.
It's only been 4 years. I mean, just quickly, Josh, did all these people express interest in joining? And when did you speak to them? Before we got this packet or after?
Yes, before you got this packet. all of them expressed interest. Like I said, the last firm there, the Thompson Coburn, we had a long conversation, but I think we both
got it.
agreed
Yeah.
they weren't really necessarily they could do it, but it's not their specialty.
No, we'll just go ahead, Arish.
So, Josh, I'm just wondering in the conversations you had. Well, I guess let me step back. I'm concerned or wondering about costs and cost control. And I do this. I'm sure Matt does as well all the time. Like I've got a range of outside counsels and law firms that I work with, and we're always trying to figure out like what's going to work for our budget, and how can we negotiate better rates, and should we switch and consolidate work? We're always jumping through those hoops. When I look at the list that we got, right, and I know people, I know a few partners at Thompson Coburn, definitely work with people at Morgan Lewis in the past. And when I look at the list, though, it's like Morgan Lewis to me is going to be very expensive on an hourly basis. Thompson Coburn, my guess would be is probably a little bit less. Shannon Wright's probably smaller, so my guess would be they're probably a little bit, expensive, but not, nearly as high. And then probably the solo is the cheapest. Just wondering though, let me get to my question. How significant is cost as an issue, and were costs part of this kind of RFI or these discussions that you had with these folks?
So we didn't have discussions about cost. I think that what we do in our budget is we carve out a chunk of money in the budget just for legal purposes. And depending on what we're doing, like in the past, we haven't for a number of years had any labor related stuff, but we will engage counsel for labor. And so that sometimes costs a different amount, right, than what we're paying right now. I think that what should happen in this case would be that the board would shortlist this. We could potentially have that follow-up in advance of the interviews. And then when we finalize, as you're finalizing the process, we can basically give feedback as staff and say, this works within the realm of what we've budgeted for, and this is appropriate, or these people are way outside of what we can possibly afford to do. And we would let you know that before you spend a lot of time on that. But that's not something that we've done at this point yet.
Got it. I just wonder, I mean, to the extent that we are cost conscious, whether it's worth addressing that up front, because we may need to expand this list and say, look, the big global firms like a Morgan Lewis or big national firms like a Thompson Coburn are out. We need to focus on more regional folks. Just, I can't say definitively, right? Because sometimes you have a specialty firm that is a very small firm that charges a lot of money. But if we're like, look, $1,000 an hour is too much to pay, or whatever that number is, we may need to actually expand this list. I'm just thinking with a group of attorneys that are more in our price range. That's probably, so we may want to just flip that around a little bit.
Yeah, and what was Lonnie charging? 350 or so? I mean, it wasn't
400. Well, his regular hourly rate is $425 an hour. He gave us $375 as sort of like a public service discount, which I think may also work in our favor in terms of getting a local law firm, because just to be able to say on your resume that, hey, I give back by basically representing the municipal bus system is going to be important to them, whereas a Thompson Coburn or Morgan Lewis, that may not be as important.
I think, do you let them know it's between like 5 and 10 hours a month too? Because they should know what the time frame is, because it will take away from other clients if they think it's a lot of work.
So I did say that generally it's pretty low key, knock on wood. I mean, particularly on the board side, there really isn't a lot going on. And of course, if we had some kind of lawsuit or some other situation that was coming against the board or our operation, we have layers of coverage that would assign counsel. So I did clarify to them that they did not need to attend every board meeting. I told them that it would be periodically, maybe once or twice a year, coming to the board just to check in, talk about board roles and responsibilities, talk about FOIA, do a refresher kind of training, which is what Lonnie has historically done. I think David and I typically are the ones who would engage on the side periodically. Where I think more time is often spent is when Dash is working through some sort of weird contracts or something like that. We've used him in the past for that. I will say one thing, just from my perspective as general manager, that is helpful. in a slightly larger firm is that when weird things pop up, although you guys are awesome and are always willing to help, I've got to be careful about the line where you're serving as a board member versus serving as counsel. So it's helpful to have someone to say, like, I had this thing pop up, or I've got this labor issue
Yep.
that's particularly unique, and I need someone who's really specialized in that. Some of these firms have that access, like they could say, oh, well, here are some partners that do that, and let's connect you. Whereas historically with Lonnie, I've just kind of had to go out and say, okay, unfortunately, he's done good work for us. We've used Josh Ehrlich. But again, there could be a little bit of a savings in time and effort if whoever is our general counsel is able to say, I'm able to go to and say, this happened. Do you have a recommendation of someone to get me in the right direction for that? It's not required, though, to be clear, like we've been able to do without it. So I don't want that to feel like that's a requirement, but it is something that I think could be a potential benefit.
Did we have a retainer agreement with Lonnie?
No.
Okay. I think we'll definitely want to get a retainer agreement and maybe make it, annually or what renewal annually. We all knew Lonnie. Whoever's coming in the door, we may not know, and it may be more palatable if they know it's a year retainer agreement. I'm surprised. How do we keep track of his hours, or was it just straight hours that we paid him?
Straight hours. So he will invoice, I don't know what the frequency is, but he'll send that to us. We'll get that paid. We send David a copy of the invoice, so he's got sort of records of the engagements with him. But that's really all that's been happening.
Yeah, I think we'll want a retainer agreement, and Arish and I've looked through dozens, probably more, probably hundreds. So, and that's just standard as well, and it protects them as well, ethically, so they know what's in there. All right, and is there any way we can notice the job description publicly?
So if there's a desire for us to put something on the site, for example, if you want to make some edits to what I sent over today, I'll get Beth the Word format. You guys can just add or change it. We don't have a mechanism. We have a standard procurement mechanism, which is a very over-the-top process for something like this. We also have job employment for direct employment, but we don't have anything in between. So the best we could probably do would be to post something. And then the thing I would ask this committee to help with is Beth and I are not in this arena, so I don't really know where to go. If you guys were to send us a list of places to email, Beth could do that. We certainly could do that if you wanted us to do that.
Yeah, go ahead, David. Sorry.
I was just going to ask if either of you are members, to Matt and Arish, are members of the Alexandria Bar Association, and would they circulate something like this among their membership?
I'm a member of the Virginia, but I bet you Alexandria would, and that's a great idea.
The only one thing about, yeah, sorry, Dave. Yep, I think that's a great idea. My concern about a general or too general posting is that we may get inundated with resumes. I mean, just, from what I've been seeing, it's a pretty robust market, and you put out a rec and you get like 100 resumes from people that are qualified and aren't qualified. But yeah, I love the idea, Dave. I think it's a great call. I think it may be worth, and I was thinking about this not in the context of posting it, but just in the context of for our own information and being able for us internally. I think you guys know Lonnie and Lonnie's work well. I don't. And so I was just thinking to myself, the job description could be a useful tool for us internally as a committee to evaluate somebody to say, here's what we really need and don't need. Maybe we work on refining it if everyone's comfortable with that. And then, David, I love the idea. I mean, circulating it to a local bar association is a great idea. So maybe we could kind of benefit from it in a couple of ways.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea. I mean, I'd also be curious how the city attorneys are hired as well. I mean, granted, they're full-time, but they must have some source or know people who've come and gone at it. No?
Beth spoke with them. They were like, we we don't have anything for you, we can't help.
How do they hire lawyers? Or you,
I would imagine that they hire them the same, like through their regular city employment process, or maybe they do a full-on procurement. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we asked for like, can you give us a list of names? Do you know people? Or they were like,
Yeah, I could see that. Now, what about either Fairfax or Art or any of the other local regionals? Do they use a counsel they'd recommend?
they're both TransDev, so they're gonna all use TransDev's corporate counsel.
They use TransDev exclusively? They don't have their own
So Fairfax, whatever Fairfax is doing is gonna be county. They're both counties, so they're both probably gonna end up utilizing the county's system, that their council or whatever. The reason we don't use the city attorney is obvious because we're not a city department.
structure. Right,
In
right.
those two cases, the places that are actually managing the contract are actually the county departments.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
are truly, they would be like tests.
yeah.
like tests. So they don't, I can ask them, I'm happy to ask them, but I would imagine that they're going to be using the county's system, and then they're looking at TransDev and saying, you've got to provide corporate
Yeah.
counsel for the need.
I mean, it'd be nice to find a niche like boutique firm that just handles public transit agency work. That would be just, a bullseye basically. But I mean, Morgan Lewis I've dealt with for years. They are, like Arish said, they're going to be thousands of dollars an hour. And they'll get you whatever you want, but it's going to cost us.
Sure. So
One thing,
another,
Lonnie,
Josh, oh, no, sorry, go.
I was just going to say, I can reach out. There are a couple, it won't be local to Alexandria, but through the state association that I run, there are several, there's a number of systems out there that are like Dash. One of them that's probably the nearest to us is out towards Loudoun County and Purcellville. That's Virginia Regional Transit, and they do have corporate counsel because Virginia Regional Transit, like us, is incorporated. And I work very closely with their executive director, so I'll ask him as well. I guess a question for us was a little bit like, do we care if they're in Alexandria or like just in Virginia as a whole? That would be a question to kind of for this committee to decide. Certainly from a perspective of when you want them to come in person, you're going to have more travel if they're, for example, out in Winchester or something and having to come in, as opposed to if they're local.
Yeah, I think you just put it in the equations and see what you get. Is it worth it or not? Certainly Alexandria is closer, but I mean, that's another reason why I think notice is important, because we are using city dollars, and people should have the right to bid on this if they live anywhere, really.
Sure.
Dave or Arish, one of you was gonna speak.
I just had a question for Josh. So, Josh, in looking at the job description, I guess what I'm trying to understand is how much of the work is specific to government services and transportation, and how much of it is just kind of general stuff that any attorney. So you have an employment issue, any decent labor employment attorney can handle it. You got a deal to negotiate, right? There's going to be some deals that are specific to our industry, and maybe deal with some government contract type nuances, but there's probably a bunch of other agreements that are just generic stuff, like for your maybe software. I don't know well enough, but so I'm just trying to, in my own mind, separate those two things. And the reason I'm asking or wanting to learn more about that from you is because maybe the answer to some degree is like, hey, we're willing to pay more and prioritize maybe more specialized experience for the things that are specialized. And maybe we take a two-track approach and say, all right, well, if we have employment issues, kind of like you've been doing, it sounds like from Lonnie, we have an employment specific firm that does general work. And, if there's general contracting work, there's relatively cheap, great lawyers that handle transactions. and you kind of have that for a separate bucket of things. But I don't know if that's feasible. If really a lot of the needs that you would have are specific to the industry or working in the government.
So historically, they have not been specific to the transportation industry as much as they've been more about, for the board, it's been more about the public sector environment, right? FOIA has always been a big one. I think David tends to use them a lot when he's trying to sort out, like, how can we talk about this and what format can we talk about this? And Lonnie admittedly has told me a number of times, let me go figure that out, because that's not his core area. On the staff side, it's really just been, I mean, examples are, we're putting in an LED sign in a new apartment complex that has a lease agreement, and the equipment is Dash's, and there's a vendor who provides that equipment, and Dash pays X number of dollars a month to maintain it. And so as a result, that apartment complex has to adhere to a contractual obligation to pay that amount. That's not necessarily specific transportation, but Dash has also not historically ever been a federal recipient or subrecipient of funds. And so the environment is changing a little bit since the last time this was talked about a number of years ago, is because whenever that funding starts to trickle down, it's going to the city. But to be clear, I've been through this before. The city's like, sure, we'll be the recipient. And then they turn right around and they look at us and they say, well, wait a minute, you guys got to do all these things. And we say, so we've got to have someone ready to kind of help us navigate that. And we're happy to do that, and we're capable of doing that. But that's where that sort of industry specific stuff might come into play, where it hasn't historically. So that's why you don't really see it reflected in the comments about what Lonnie has historically done. It's just mainly because it hasn't been needed. So
okay, that's helpful.
David?
Yeah, so I will say, I mean, from the board perspective, when I've had to engage with Lonnie, it has been, a lot of it has also been about just our unique structure within the city and kind of also being engaging with the city. So our bylaws changes, for example, or how we would, Josh is payrolled by the city, but actually reports to us. And so some of that interplay with, how to memorialize changes in compensation, things like that. Lonnie has been uniquely helpful as a former member of council, at least from my perspective and the questions I've had, because he either has some experience from having been a stockholder or can very easily go, and he has emailed Justin Wilson and just said, hey, how do you guys handle this with, this employee who reports directly to council and not through the manager? So, that has been, and I guess somewhat to Josh's point of Lonnie not kind of being an expert in everything that we need, but at least on some of the local stuff, he was very good at being able to find answers kind of quickly, which, just from precedent, instead of somebody who would have to then kind of do a lot of roundabout research or hope that the city attorney might be willing to help them. So I think that is something, when I look at local, I think there are some advantages there, but Josh does raise, and when I saw the law firm that had a lot of the FTA oversight, I was that was going to be my question coming into this meeting. Well, is that something that we have to have now, or how is some of that compliance going to be handled? Josh has kind of unpacked some of that for us, because I do remember that there was going to be at one point a position in tests, I think, that was going to deal with all the FTA compliance. I know that position has gone away, but how much of that then is on us, and are we better off just then bringing in somebody as we need for that, or looking for some of that here? And I think we have to continue to kind of figure that out as we go. And then the other point I would just make, and I think Josh did a great job putting the position description together. I would, and he'll bill us, I'm sure, an hour or so, but I would have Lonnie review that position description before we circulate it and see if there's anything that he would add or convey based on the work that he's done that should be included.
Josh, were there months when Lonnie wouldn't charge us at all? He would do no work.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes in little spurts.
Hmm.
No
Okay.
rhyme or reason to it, but yeah.
All right. So, I mean, we don't need to go all day, but let me just map out a course. Maybe, Arish, if you want to take a first stab at revising it and, or I can, whichever way, send it back to Josh. Then Josh, you send it off to Lonnie to review. And then in the meantime, I'll try to contact the Alexandria Bar Association and see if they have a job posting, and then put up that job description once it's done. And Josh, if you don't mind putting on the final job description a contact place where people can reply or respond.
Yeah, if it's okay with you all, I mean, Beth's been helping us with this. We'll just have them submit materials. Now, that one question for you all, do you want to get those materials as they come in, or do you want Beth to compile them all as one packet and send them to you?
One packet.
Okay.
Well, that'd be my preference.
Thank you.
So then you're going to need to establish
The
what the
deadline.
timeline is of when you want that to happen. So,
Okay, so maybe 30 days after we post.
okay.
All right.
Is there, let me ask from a timing perspective, I know we've got some preliminary interviews lined up already. Is there, Josh, from your standpoint, an urgent kind of timing need? Or, I mean, I agree, I'm in favor of having a process that allows ample time for people to apply and then interview. But, just curious, Josh, are there any particular timing needs from your standpoint?
I mean, David, you talked to some length with Lonnie about his timing. Maybe you'd be better to answer that.
So Lonnie is he's winding down his practice, but he's not retiring completely. So he had asked us to have a transition plan by the end of the year.
Oh, I see. Okay, interesting. Okay, so we can take our time with this a little bit. Does that mean, one, should we be deferring the meetings that have been scheduled in August, or changing those to internal kind of catch-ups again instead of, because I thought we had almost scheduled that for like an interview panel, and I want to say like the first or second week of August. I can't remember off the top of my head, sorry.
Like it's your next hold spot is for Tuesday the 13th
Okay.
at 1 p.m. Now I would offer, if you want to talk to, I mean, if we get all that stuff done with the description, we can have it posted and whatnot and get more interested people coming in. I don't think there's anything to say if you wanted to, you couldn't go ahead and talk to some or any of these folks who are already on the list. But it's up to you. I mean, as a committee, you can decide you want to hold it all until you've got them all ready, or you can just chip at them as you go. That would be an important thing for you all to decide.
Go
I
ahead,
guess
Arish.
I'm still a little bit spinning my wheels on the cost issue, and whether and how to tackle that, to front end that. Because, for instance, right, I mean, Josh, I think these are all great. I'm sure they're fantastic attorneys, but again, like, Morgan Lewis is a large global firm. They probably have 2,000 lawyers plus, right? I would going to be north of $1,000 an hour. Thompson Coburn's a decent sized like national firm, similarly would expect that their rates are pretty high. And so, like, I love the idea of getting on and talking to them. I'm happy to have that conversation. But if it's just a barrier in terms of like realistically, hey, we can't pay somebody $1,000+ an hour, it's probably not worth our time to do it, as great as they are, and they are great candidates, I'm sure. So I'm trying to go back and forth, and I'm amenable to anything. I'm happy to jump on a call. Just so you guys know, I will be gone for most of August. I'm going to be in India for a lot of it, but I told Beth I will jump in and join those calls, because I'm also going to be working odd hours of the night. So it's no big deal for me to be on any of those calls, and happy to do that, Josh. So really defer, David and Matt, like, what do you guys think about doing a round of interviews, even if they may be priced out or something?
I think you make a good point. I mean, maybe, do we solicit what people's hourly rates are? If interested, please provide us your availability and hourly rate, general hourly rate. Or does that scare people off, or does it promote more people who may not otherwise be interested coming forward?
I like that idea. And, Josh, we could certainly reach back out, or if you don't mind, or whoever, like, reaching back out to the folks here you talked to, and, hey, great conversation. Like, what do your rates look like, just to get that information. But this is my thought.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
you know, when Matt and I had engaged in some conversation very early on, because Lonnie had recommended Caitlin Momo, who is a partner in the firm Lonnie's currently in, and so it would seem that would we probably would have the most leverage there in terms of, you know, if they want to keep us as a client in order to kind of push to maintain the hourly rate that Lonnie was currently charging. She is admittedly a less experienced attorney than Lonnie, but Lonnie's rate probably, which he hasn't adjusted, I think, since we retained him in 2018, so is probably low for, you know, just given inflation, what we would see from other local law firms, and so we'll probably need to be prepared for some cushion in our budget. But you know, I don't know. I would think the local attorneys we'd have an easier time negotiating with them on that, but you know, I could be wrong on that. But it would be interesting to get perspective from different types of firms for sure.
And it's not even a negotiation. If you ask them what their billing rates are, their incentive is to go low to get the job. So, you know, we don't really need to negotiate because they're probably aware of what their peers are charging. But the other thing, Josh, you said our next meeting is on the 13th. Is it on the 14th of August, a Wednesday? That's what I have in my calendar. I could be wrong.
I have the 13th.
Yes,
Okay.
showing on my calendar the 13th at 1. Now, to be clear, I think Beth, you just went ahead and held those dates for us. You all can say we don't need to meet. You know, you can wait. That's fine. They're just held. None of these firms have been told be here on this date. So no one's slotted in there at this point. So it's really up to you all as a committee to decide if you want to hold any of those. But I think knowing everybody's calendar gets busy, my ask to Beth was go ahead and lock in dates for this group so that we're ready to go if you're ready. And if you're not, then we'll just knock them off and we'll look at future dates and hold those.
Yeah, August 29th is the second date.
August 29th is the other one. Yeah. So this one is on the 13th and one is held on the 29th.
Arish, are you back by then or no?
Sorry?
So, you know, actually the 29th is going to be really tough for me, unfortunately, because I'm going to be traveling or about to travel. So if we could just rearrange that one, that's great. I can definitely join the 13th rather, if for instance, like we wanted to say, you know, get the rates and meet with whoever's in the price range, or I'm also in favor of just waiting until later in the month and doing more at once, really whatever. I'm amenable to all of it. I did just realize, and sorry, Beth, the 29th became a conflict. It was open when we booked it, but now based on just some changes I made to my travel schedule, it's a conflict for me, or not a conflict, but it's a challenge.
I don't even think I replied, Beth. I don't recall seeing that. We can't hear you now.
You're unmuted, but coming through.
Yeah, her headset's been. Well, yeah, so just let us know. I think if you all just decide if you want to meet those days, great. If not, we can easily look at September and just go ahead and start floating dates to you all and ask you to let us know and lock in some dates so that you're ready to go. And we're certainly fine to continue on the back end. There's we can go ahead and circulate you all the rates based off of what we receive. You just can't make decisions. You can't correspond back and forth and talk about that, but you can receive all that information and be ready to go and then come back. You can also talk on the side one-on-one if you need to about any of that stuff. But you know, we're happy to follow your, you know, whatever your process needs to be. We can flex that. That's fine.
I mean, I don't think we're going to get, you know, 50 resumes or people of interest. It's not going to be that big. So maybe we'll outline, as we said, you know, we'll go through the job description, post it 30 days later. Beth, if you don't mind giving us the applicants and maybe billing rate order, and that way we can sort of, you know, have a meeting, set up a meeting among us and maybe narrow it down to, I don't know, depending on how many come in, you know, a half a dozen, and then interview.
And Josh, so I love that idea. Josh, just going back to the point you were making about information, what's permissible in terms of sharing. I'll take a crack at revising the job description. I think definitely, especially, you, David, because of all the experience and interaction that you are used to having with Lonnie, probably would love for you guys to refine it. Is it something that I can like share as a Google Doc kind of thing, or share with the team and we can all live kind of make edits, or I think that's fine, right? There's no reason not to do that kind of thing.
The
Yeah.
live part is problematic, Arish.
Yeah, okay.
We should have space in between, not live.
Okay, so I can email a draft and then we can sort of redraft and I'll share by email. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, just run it around the horn and, we'll ultimately get it back to you. And then when you're good with it, send it up to Josh, and then Josh will send it to Lonnie, and then maybe back around and then post.
Great. Okay. And I will add something in there about disclosing, like, please respond, with your resume, and your hourly rate, to put that in the kind of RFI. Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Great.
Any other questions?
My only other question is about how we push it out. Again, kind of going back to, this isn't a procurement, sort of standard procurement channels, which would be like government solicitation platforms. They're typically used for those purposes. Board meetings are typically just noticed by way of our e-blast. None of these people are going to be signed up for that. Our website is not going to be something, it's very passive. Maybe if you all think of, like, send to this listserv or send to this group, we can take out an ad somewhere if we need to, but again, it's kind of a weird space for us. So you don't have to answer that right this moment if you want to think about it, but we just want to know how or where to put this to try to get people to see it. That's all.
Yeah. So I think, the Bar Association, Alexandria Bar, and then will the city allow us to put a notice up?
I think we can check into that. Again, I don't know what the city. The question would be, is it flow through the city's procurement side, which, like,
Yeah, I don't.
anything going there is 6 to 12 months minimum lead time right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we wouldn't get anywhere there, but we'll ask the city attorney's office also if they have some distribution lists they can push it out to.
Okay.
And try it that way. But again, if you all think of something, just like, hey, this place would be good or that spot would be good, Beth can work on getting it sent over to them.
This is semi-flippant, but is it possible we could put an ad inside the bus?
Yes.
I mean, that would be the best of both worlds.
Nobody reads. I mean, those are challenging. Nobody looks up anymore to read.
Yeah.
And you're counting on
Although
a
I like the
small
idea
population.
that's how somebody finds out about it. I give them a leg up, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I do love the idea of the bar and any other groups that you all in your industry have, like, that circulate things. If you think of any of those.
Sure. Okay. All right. Anything else?
So are you canceling the 13th and the 29th at this point?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
And we'll, when we have a firm date of 30 days after we get the job description, then we'll figure out when to meet again. Probably like a week or so after.
Okay, so since Beth's mic isn't working, I'm going to talk for her. So once it's posted, after it's been posted, notice you all that it's been posted and where, and then go ahead and send you some possible dates 30 days out from that to potentially start locking down opportunities and calendars.
Yes.
Okay.
You might as well give us a job description so at least we can circulate it too if need be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask Beth to resend you the Word document, and then you can get us that. You want to start with what's the order?
Arish,
David,
me, back to
Lonnie?
Arish. Oh, back to Arish. Then Arish to Lonnie via you. And then if Lonnie doesn't make any changes, that's it. If he does, just send it right back around.
Got it.
So I'll take a first crack and circulate to the group, and we'll go from there. And Beth, I can just convert the doc to a Word doc, but if you have it handy and you want to send it to me, that's great. But I can convert it too. So whatever's easier.
Got a Word doc for you.
Yeah. Okay.
I also, and
And-
let me ask Matt and Arish your opinion on this. It just occurred to me, George Mason would be the closest law school geographically to us. I don't know if their sort of career development office would have any ideas of ways to post it, or if they would push it out to their alums. What do you?
That's a great idea.
So.
That's a great idea.
Any other schools in the area that we should think about, at least
Yeah,
inquiring?
I'm connected to, I went to American, I'm connected to the American Career Services Office. So same thing we could ask. It's a little bit unusual because the Career Services departments usually focus on full-time opportunities, whereas this is more of us soliciting a law firm like anybody who's looking for a client. So it's a little bit of an interesting hybrid. I don't know how much traction we'll get from a career services group or even interest, but we can certainly ask. There's no harm. It's just in my experience, they're usually targeting helping alums get permanent placements or students get permanent placements. Yeah, so that's the only thing. Okay, and by the way, I didn't mean to suggest like I am around August. Like I said, I'm going to be working. So if working odd hours. So if folks want to get together again, happy to do that if for an internal thing or whatever.
And, I wouldn't do this as a time for interviews, but if we need to have a touch base, I mean, we'll all be together in September at the board meeting, which usually is a lighter agenda and hopefully is shaping up so far to be that way. We could certainly have that meeting. We could certainly meet as a group after that as well. That's, an option for touching base. So.
Okay, good idea. All right, so we have a plan and we'll just try to figure it out.
And Josh, just before we go, if you could talk a little more about, if that's something, a longer term conversation about kind of some of the FTA oversight and sort of what we, maybe that's something we should, have engaged the board about, kind of what is going to be expected from that in terms of, I don't know if their audits are cyclical or if they are sort of just random, but, just what resources we might need, and if a lot of that is on Dash, sort of how we are also planning within our budget to have capacity for that, just be helpful. And I maybe can talk, one-on-one about that when we have our next check-in.
Sure. I'll say from a high level, what I anticipate is that we'll get going. The city will be the recipient and will be considered a sub-recipient, which eases a little bit of the stuff that comes to us. But I think further along, as FTA starts to come in and want to sit down and dig in more, it is likely, if not a certainty, that the city will turn to Dash and say, well, that's on you. Sit down and have that meeting. You're the subrecipient, or some sort of version of that where we will. I still am holding in my long-term expectations that we will have some sort of a grants specialist here at Dash. I know that there's been a little pushback, I think, from the city's side as to the necessity of that, but the reality is we're here to do a job for them, and we're here to run the system, and we're here to actually make it possible to use these funds. So I'm still in back of my mind expecting there will be a day there's a person like that. They wouldn't be a legal person, right? Much of this stuff is about policy and process and procedure. The place a legal component would come in would be on the contracting side, where we deal with questions about our compliance with that, or setting up contracts that meet the FTA requirements, or helping to review proposed documents. A place where the city attorney's office could potentially help anyway, because they will be one of the recipients. So that's my high take on it. I think we will probably have a combination of a little bit of legal stuff, but probably it's going to be more about the technical skills and someone who's just sort of handling the navigation of the management of the grant internally and with the city. Which is a lot cheaper way, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper to have someone who's just a specialist in grants and that kind of stuff, as opposed to no offense to our attorneys here, but the cost of legal counsel much higher.
Understand.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, we do have to go to work, so.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? Seeing none, we'll just play it as it, see how it unfolds and go from there.
Very helpful, guys. We
All right, thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Take care. Thanks,
guys.
Beth.
See ya. Have a good day.
All right. See y'all. Bye.